Welcome to the show, and today we are talking about, we got Bong Joon-ho in the theaters right now with Mickey 17, and so I thought we'd discuss, I think, what was maybe his breakout as it built from a cult perspective.
Yeah, there was in the early 2000s, there was an explosion of film coming out of Korea, and this kind of got swept into maybe it missed your radar of a lot of Korean films coming out in the early 2000s. I kind of missed this one.
Yeah, so. It was a bit of a comeback film. The original, like the previous film from Bong Joon-ho, had been a failure. So this was kind of seen as a cult film that garnered that kind of prestige and has been cleaned up in the 2020s.
Okay.
Memories of Murder. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of the drop-kicking detectives, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
And I'm one of the incompetent film reviewers.
Oh.
Right. Yeah, thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for Aloha fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Another way you can support the show, I'm going to say it. Join the Patreon. We got some great content, great deals, and, of course, opportunities to tell us what movies we can review with a future episode. And a shout-out to you as well. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Association. You know what you can do? You can hit the like, subscribe button. That's a little thing you can do, but it's a big thing for us. And, of course, tell your friends about the show as well. And today we're going to talk about one that kind of, I don't know, a lot of was talked about a lot in the early 2000s. I mean, we had Old Boy, we had Lady Vengeance and Mr. Vengeance, and now we have Memories of a Murder. So let's talk about it.
Two detectives with wildly different methods attempt to uncover the identity of a serial killer in 1986 South Korea.
Okay, I would like to it's a brilliant scope of incompetence.
Yeah.
And that's the word of the day. Basically, people completely out of their element. And I have to say, a lot of serial killers get away with it because of botchy police investigation. This is another one of these, things that shows how serial killers sometimes get away with it is because of botchy investigations.
Yeah, and the film kind of originated as a 1996 play called Come to See Me, as well as being based on actual events. What they
true story,
believed to be the first official multiple serial killer situation that they had in South Korea
in the late 80s. Yeah,
and so that ran from 1986 to 1991 was like the bulk of it. And what's crazy about the film is this was made during a time when the actual culprit had not been caught. And so Bong Joon-ho kind of came to this and he wanted to make sure that it was incredibly respectful for what the victims' families were still living through because they did not have closure. So
right, he does
like
shooting the victims because how they found, you don't get the full head-to-toe shot. You get a little snippet of it.
Yeah.
Almost like not showing all of it is more terrifying. You get a little bit of the ants all over the body and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love the play that this visually looks very harsh. Music and camera looks very soft. It's like very different contrasting.
Yeah, I loved what he'd said about directing the film, where he wanted to have these really picturesque, beautiful, like outdoor sequences mixed with these grotesque slangs and kind of have that juxtaposition between the beautiful world and the horrors within. And there's even culminating, I guess, with the complete absence of light in the finale that is set in a train tunnel.
Yep, the train.
Featuring what is often referred to as the abyss. There was a professor of Korean film that actually termed it the abyss, and he said that Bong Joon-ho had this in almost every single one of his films. There was the basement in Parasite, and he constantly had certain elements of like the abyss, the darkness that exists within reality, which makes him very Lynchian at times.
Yeah, so very harshness with the colors, but the scope of outside looks brilliant. Going on technically, I love that he doesn't move the camera hardly at all, but you gotta understand, if you're making films, if you're not gonna move the camera, you have to have a lot of action going on.
Yeah. There's that one sequence where they're getting drunk in like that bar, and they're having like the conversation that evolves into a fight, and they've got their other friend that is like making out with someone behind the couch, and he comes over, and so now there's another thing going on in the background.
Yeah.
I guess the police boss, sergeant, whatever he may be, is getting sick behind them on the couch. Like, there's all these things happening in the frame, and yet we're incredibly focused on the main story while never losing sight of what's happening behind the scenes.
So it's the play lane. It's camera still, but busy action. Even in the police office, the camera's not moving. I think the only time the camera's moving is trying to react to scene, and you can tell the guy moving as we follow along that it's getting, this is not going to be good. And the guy's telling him it's not going to be good. But right, I like that and Kyle's right. Where you're winning with what's in front of the camera. They don't need to move it.
Yeah, it only moves actually when the characters have to stop, which I think is fascinating because there is, and it's a very subtle movement, like when they've captured what they believe to be their first suspect, and they bring him to the scene of the crime, and they basically like convince him to repeat the situation going on. There's some very slight camera zooms that are like almost indiscernible unless you're looking for them.
Clever.
But you find yourself focused on what he's saying, and it's almost as if they stop telling him what to say at that point, and it moves into he starts saying it back.
Exactly.
You know,
right.
The camera has a lot of purpose in the film, and I think it's so interesting that it doesn't move when it doesn't need to because of what's on display. And how we get to see these two characters, you know, one played by Song Kang-ho and the other played by Kim Sang-kyung, who are the two detectives with their completely different takes, as they actually kind of pass like ships in the night and kind of take on each other's
two different
situations.
incompetence.
Yeah, but they both have learned from each other in the best and worst ways, which I think is very fascinating.
Yeah, right. Yes. So you have this, I would say the subtext is incompetence, right? That's my word of the day. But also you have this where nobody's costumes pop out. Everybody's kind of trapped in the environment. Even feels like the character is even stuck in the environment. Nothing seems to move out of it. And a good explanation. Even if when everything is drab, people are wearing drab. When everything is bright, everybody's bright. So they're also moving ships in the night inside the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really comes down to, at the time in the late 80s over there was a lot of political turmoil. There was a lot of concerns about police overreach. And so you even had a situation where, in the decades following this film, there was looking into the police investigation and the ways in which certain people were coerced into saying it. So, like, this is a fictionalized account of what took place, but it is also hitting on a lot of those hard truths about police overreach. And I think, like, they make a good job of satirizing Song Kang-ho's character, the lead detective, because he's very much not a good person at the start of the film.
Yeah,
I don't
he
know
goes
if
to a
ever becomes
shaman.
good person,
I just have to look at a guy and I know he's guilty. That's not how things work.
Yeah, but you also understand he's never dealt with a situation like this. It's almost like a serious take on what we'd see with like Simon Pegg's Hot Fuzz, where it was just like it's a town out of their element, and the police force doesn't know how to handle a situation like this.
It'd be interesting.
And so he's okay with it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see something, and I can see the inspiration of Twin Peaks to this.
Yeah.
It looks very melodramatic at times, but it looks almost like a horror movie at times. It looks very surreal in its environments, and then it looks like it's trapped in its own world a little bit.
Yeah, there's that inescapable quality, even like as the detective from outside comes in, who has what is perceived as radical, but it's actually kind of more straightforward intensity.
Yes.
He's more normal when he arrives, but how the town changes him as well, and how the situation he has with our lead detective is further entrenched, and how he becomes more erratic as he loses focus, and how Detective Park actually grows, maybe not fully, but he evolves a little bit in the process.
Man, I really enjoyed this movie. This is the first time watching for me. I was really impressed.
It's cool to and I'll say this, it's really cool to rewatch, because there are things I did not notice the first time that allow you to kind of really they make it a more tragic story, because you see elements in the film of how close they are actually coming to breaking something. And it's got an interesting place.
The car stall, right? Yeah.
It's got an interesting place in history because, the film, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, the film does end with a moment where he's 17 years have passed, he's now not working as a detective anymore, and he's gotten a new job because it's not the right job for him, which is maybe the best choice his character's ever made.
I think so.
But then he finds himself back at the scene of the first crime, and he learns from this young girl that there was a man that came here who looked ordinary and said he had done something here a long time ago. And I love this moment because even Bong Joon-ho kind of said he knew the killer would be watching this movie. And so that moment when Song Kang-ho's character turns to address the camera, he's addressing the audience saying, "You're out there." Yes. And I think that's a really fascinating way to end the film. And in fact,
it's also the misnomer that this serial killer is going to have a long, gruesome features, right? There's always that caricature of just a big bad creepy with creepy fingers, right? Yeah.
Well, and how he says early on in the film, you said it best earlier, where he goes, I can look at a guy and I can tell that he's the criminal. And what is the defining feature of this guy? That he is ordinary.
Yeah.
So it gets into things we've already seen before in film, but it works pretty well within that site. And I think that's a fascinating idea, is that he's looking out at the killer, who was actually caught 16 years later. He confessed to the crimes, and it's been taken care of. So you can kind of look up more information about that on the Wikipedia. But it's kind of fascinating that they did catch the criminal eventually, and so we do at least have some semblance of hope.
I don't know. I really enjoy this movie. It would be like a top 3 if I had to list one of his movies. It's just one of those that it looks intimate, but it looks big.
Yeah.
It looks harsh, but then it's beautiful. And it looks like it's a soap opera, but then it goes horror movie.
Yep.
And it mixes all those contrasts without looking like it's not losing its path at all.
Yeah, and I love the score because the score has a very Twin Peaks-y kind of Lynchian vibe where it's very melodramatic, very calm, very beautiful, and yet so grotesque at the same time. So it's a very solid movie, looks gorgeous, and what's funny about it is I think it's maybe his most iconic film, but it's the one no one watches first, it seems. Every person I talk to is like, well, I saw Okja first, and then I went to Memories of Murder. There are people that saw Parasite first, or Snowpiercer. No one saw this movie first, apparently. So,
all right, what do you think of our assessment of Memories of a Murder? Keep the conversation going. We love to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us for another episode, and maybe give us your favorite Bong Joon-ho film that you think not enough people have seen down in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for watching.